I am 87 years old, and I have not spoken to my daughter in 7 years, not because I do not love her, but because at 70 I made a decision that destroyed my relationship with her. I stopped lending her money. That is not the beginning of this story. This is the end. But before you judge me, before you think I am a monster, I need you to understand something. My daughter has not spoken to me in 7 years. My son is angry with me, and my grandchildren do not know me, and I am at complete peace. Because the money I stopped lending was bleeding me dry, it was killing my retirement, it was destroying my marriage, it was stealing my final years, and when I stopped, everything changed, not the way I hoped, but in a way that was necessary. So before you lend your children another dollar, listen to what happened to me, because it might save your life. Let me go back to the beginning. I had 2 children, a daughter, Sarah, and a son, Michael. I loved them with everything I had. I worked hard. I provided. I paid for their college. I gave them a good start. My wife and I spent 40 years saving for retirement. We skipped vacations. We drove old cars. We said no to ourselves so we could say yes to our children. But at some point, providing became lending, and lending became a pattern, and the pattern became my entire retirement. Sarah was the first. She called at 45 years old. Her marriage was falling apart. She needed money for a lawyer. I gave her $20,000. I told myself it was a loan. She never paid it back. Then her car broke down. She needed $5,000 to replace it. I gave it to her. Michael needed help with his house payment. Another $15,000. His business was struggling. Another $10,000. By the time I was 65, I had given my children more than $200,000, not as gifts, as loans, loans that were never repaid, loans that were never discussed, loans that everyone pretended did not exist. I still remember watching my daughter graduate from college. I remember feeling proud. I thought I had done my job. I thought the hard part was over. I had no idea that the real challenge of parenthood would begin when my children became adults, and every time I told myself the same lie. I am helping them. I am being a good parent. This is what parents do. But what I was actually doing was destroying my own financial security. I was teaching my children that they could take from me without consequence. I was enabling their bad decisions, and I was making myself dependent on them in my final years. At 70, I was broke. My retirement savings were depleted. My pension was barely enough to live on, and my children were still calling asking for money. The moment everything changed happened on a Tuesday in March. Sarah called. She needed $30,000. Her daughter needed braces. Her house needed a new roof. Her husband had lost his job. And I said, no, that is it. I just said no. I did not offer an alternative. I did not suggest a solution. I did not give her $1,000 to help bridge the gap. I just said no. There was silence on the phone. I could hear her breathing, and then she said, Dad, how could you? She is your granddaughter. Do you not care about her? And that is when I realized something. She was not asking me to help her. She was asking me to sacrifice myself, and I had been doing it for 20 years. I said to her, Sarah, I love you, and I love my granddaughter, but I cannot give you this money. I do not have it. And even if I did, I cannot give it. She said, then you do not care about us. And I said, that is not true, but I have to care about myself now, because if I do not, I will have nothing, and then I will be a burden to you. She hung up the phone, and she did not call again for 7 years. After I hung up the phone, I cried. I am not ashamed to admit that. I sat in my chair and stared at the wall. For 50 years, my identity had been wrapped up in being the man who fixed problems, and suddenly I had chosen not to fix one. Michael called the next week. Sarah had told him what happened. He was angry. He said I was being selfish. He said this is what families do for each other. He said I was abandoning them in their time of need. And I listened to him, and I felt guilty. I felt like a monster. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, but I did not break. I did not call Sarah back with money. I did not offer Michael help. I just said, I love you, but I cannot do this anymore. The anger was intense. My daughter stopped bringing my grandchildren to visit. My son made a comment at Thanksgiving that made it clear I was the bad guy in the family. Even my wife struggled with the decision. Some nights she would ask me if we had done the right thing. Other nights she would quietly sit beside me and remind me that we had spent 20 years sacrificing our own peace. We were both learning how to stop feeling guilty. But something strange happened as time went on. The guilt started to fade, and something else started to take its place: peace. For the first time in 20 years, I was not waiting for the phone to ring with a financial emergency. I was not calculating in my head how much money I had left to give. I was not lying awake at night worrying about whether I had enough for retirement. My pension covered my living expenses. I could afford to take my wife to dinner. I could afford to pay my bills without stress. I could afford to live the last years of my life without terror about becoming a burden. But my family did not recover from this. They were not grateful that I had set a boundary. They were not relieved that I was taking care of myself. They were angry. My daughter wrote me an email. It was 3 pages long. It detailed every time I had said no to her. It detailed the hard times she had gone through because I would not help. It accused me of being a selfish man who loved money more than family. She did not mention the $200,000 I had already given her. She did not acknowledge that she had never repaid a single dollar. She did not recognize that I was drowning in debt because of her. My sons stopped inviting me to family dinners. My grandchildren grew up barely knowing me. I missed their graduations, their first jobs, their weddings. I missed all of it because I said no to lending money. That part still hurts. I will not pretend it doesn't. There are birthdays I missed, school plays I never saw, pictures I only saw through social media. There are moments I can never get back, and according to my family, I was the selfish one. I was the one who abandoned them. I was the one who did not care about family. But here is the thing that they did not understand. By enabling their bad decisions, I was not being generous. I was being cruel. I was teaching them that they could avoid responsibility. I was teaching them that other people would always bail them out. I was setting them up to fail. And now, at 87, I see the results. My daughter still lives paycheck to paycheck. My son's business still struggles. My grandchildren do not know their grandfather, but at least I have peace. At least I have security. At least I can sleep at night. People think that lending money to your children is love. It is not. It is fear. It is the fear that they will be disappointed in you if you say no. It is the fear that they will not love you if you do not help. It is the fear of being a bad parent, but real love is different. Real love is saying no when they ask for the wrong thing. Real love is watching them struggle and knowing that the struggle is necessary for them to grow. Real love is protecting your own well-being so that you do not become a burden on them later. My daughter needed me to say no. It would have forced her to figure things out. It would have made her stronger. It would have made her a better person. Instead, I said yes, over and over. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if my constant rescuing prevented my children from discovering their own strength. A daughter who blames her father for not saving her. And then when I finally said no, I was the villain. I understand now that my family needed me to fail them. They needed to learn what happens when you do not pay your bills, when you do not manage your money, when you do not take responsibility for your own life. But instead of learning that lesson, they learned that I was selfish, so they have not changed. They have just learned to blame me instead. But I am at peace, and that is the thing that upsets them the most. I am not racked with guilt. I am not desperately trying to make amends. I am not sacrificing my final years trying to buy back their love. Peace does not mean happiness every day. Peace does not mean I stopped missing my family. It simply means I stopped fighting. Reality. I wake up in the morning and I have money in my bank account. I can pay my bills. I can take my wife out. I can live the life I earned. I do not have to work extra years because my children took advantage of me. My daughter has not spoken to me in 7 years. My son sees me once a year out of obligation. My grandchildren are strangers, and I am okay with that, because the alternative is to give everything to people who do not appreciate it, while I starve in my final years. Love without boundaries eventually becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without limits eventually becomes resentment. And I understand now that my family will never forgive me. They will never see my side. They will never understand that I was protecting myself, and I am okay with that, because at 87 I do not need their forgiveness. I need my peace. I spent my whole life being the provider, the helper, the good parent, and it almost destroyed me. It almost cost me my retirement. It almost made me dependent on my children in my final years. At 70, I finally stopped, and everything changed. Not my family, but me. I am 87 years old, and I stopped lending money to my children at 70, and my family never recovered from that boundary, but I did. I recovered. I found peace. Perhaps your story is different from mine. Perhaps your children are different. I am not telling you what to do. I am only sharing what life taught me, and if any part of my story touched your heart, I would love to hear yours in the comments. Sometimes the greatest comfort comes from realizing we are not alone. And if you enjoy these conversations about family, aging, and the lessons life teaches us, I hope you will join me again by subscribing. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of those you love.